The red vinyl stool at the Woolworth's counter spun under your hand, the waitress slid a plate across without writing anything down, and for less than $1 you had a hot lunch that no drive-thru in this country has come close to since. That counter fed more Americans on their lunch break than most sit-down restaurants ever dreamed of. The food was fast, it was cheap, and nobody called it fast food. The item at number 14 has a name that sounds like something a kid made up at bedtime, but it was one of the most ordered things on the Woolworth's menu for years. And what they did with a 10-cent can of deviled ham at number 19 will make you wonder why anybody stopped. Every one of these dishes sat under a heat lamp or came right off a flat-top grill, and when Woolworth's finally closed its doors, these foods walked out of American daily life and never came back. Here are 25 famous Woolworth's lunch counter foods that vanished after the 1960s. Number 25, pimento cheese sandwich, sharp cheddar ground up with mayonnaise and a jar of diced pimentos spread thick on soft white bread and cut corner to corner. No lettuce, no tomato, nothing fancy. This was the sandwich that every Woolworth's in the South had ready before the doors opened. The pimento cheese was mixed fresh each morning in most locations, kept in a steel bowl behind the counter, and spooned out by the scoop. You could get one for under $1 in the early 1960s. It was the kind of sandwich that tasted better at a lunch counter than it ever did at home because the bread was always fresh and the cheese had that slightly tangy bite from sitting in the cooler overnight. When the counters closed, pimento cheese retreated back to church suppers and family reunions, and the lunch counter version disappeared completely. Number 24, lime jello salad. A square of bright green gelatin loaded with shredded carrots, crushed pineapple, and sometimes cottage cheese served on a leaf of iceberg lettuce with a dollop of mayonnaise on top. Woolworth's lunch counters kept these pre-made in individual glass dishes behind the counter, lined up on a refrigerated shelf where you could point at the one you wanted. It counted as a salad. It counted as a side. Some people ordered it as dessert. Nobody questioned it. The green wobble was part of the scenery at every five and dime counter in the country, and when those counters shut down, the Jell-O salad lost its last public stage. You can still find the recipe in old church cookbooks, but nobody is serving it over a lunch counter anymore. Before I go any further, for the folks who want more of these kinds of recipes all gathered in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. That is the only time I will mention it. If it sounds like something you need, it is right there. Now, back to the list. Number 23, creamed chipped beef on toast. Dried beef torn into strips, stirred into a thick white sauce made from butter, flour, and whole milk, then spooned over a piece of toast. Soldiers had a name for it that nobody repeated in polite company. Woolworth's just called it lunch. The sauce was heavy, salty, and filling, and it cost almost nothing to make, which is exactly why it showed up on dime store menus across the country. A plate of creamed chipped beef at Woolworth's came with a cup of coffee if the waitress liked you. The beef itself was paper thin, almost translucent, shaved from a pressed block that sat in the kitchen cooler. When Woolworth's faded creamed chipped beef on toast went with it. You can still buy the dried beef in a jar, but the lunch counter version, served hot and fast on a thick slice of white toast, is gone. Number 22, cottage cheese and peach plate. A scoop of cottage cheese in the center of a plate, surrounded by canned peach halves, sometimes with a maraschino cherry dropped in the middle. This was the diet plate. Every woman watching her figure in the 1950s and 1960s ordered this, and every Woolworth's had it on the menu. No cooking involved. The peaches came out of a commercial-sized can, the cottage cheese out of a 5-pound tub, and the whole thing was plated in under a minute. It looked like health food before health food existed. The combination of sweet canned fruit and cold, lumpy cottage cheese was considered a sensible choice at the time, and ordering it at the counter meant you were being practical. That entire idea vanished with the counter itself. Number 21, egg salad sandwich. Hard-boiled eggs mashed with mayonnaise, a little mustard, salt, pepper, and maybe some finely chopped celery if the cook felt generous. pressed between soft bread and cut in half. Woolworths made these by the dozens every morning, wrapped them in wax paper, and stacked them in a glass case at the counter. They were cold, they were plain, and they cost next to nothing. The egg salad sandwich was what you ordered when you had 15 cents and no opinion about lunch. Every Woolworths coast to coast had the same one, made the same way, tasting roughly the same whether you were in Portland or Tallahassee. That kind of national consistency from a lunch counter without a franchise playbook is something that does not exist anymore. What the Woolworths counter really was. The lunch counter at Woolworths was never meant to be a restaurant. It was a trap. You walked in to buy a spool of thread or a tube of lipstick, and the smell of grilled onions and toasted bread pulled you onto a stool before you made it to the register. Frank Woolworth figured out early that a fed customer stays longer and spends more. So the counter became the anchor of the store. But something happened that nobody planned for. The counter became the place where people went on purpose. Retirees, working mothers, teenagers skipping class, store clerks on their break. It became a public table in a country that was running out of public tables. And when it disappeared, nothing replaced it. Not the food court, not the drive-through window. The counter was the last place in American retail where strangers sat elbow to elbow and ate the same food. Number 20. Welsh Rarebit. Cheddar cheese melted down with a splash of Worcestershire sauce, sometimes a little beer, poured hot over a thick piece of toast. Woolworths served it as a lunch special, usually with a pickle on the side. The name sounded fancy. The dish was anything but. It was melted cheese on bread with a kick, and it cost about as much as a grilled cheese but felt like twice the meal. Welsh Rarebit had been around for centuries, but the Woolworths version stripped it down to its simplest form. No ramekin, no broiler crust, just a ladle of cheese sauce over toast on a heavy ceramic plate. When the counters closed, Welsh Rarebit lost its last foothold in everyday American eating. Today it exists almost exclusively in British pubs and old cookbooks, and most people under 50 have never heard of it. Number 19. Deviled ham sandwich. Underwood deviled ham spread straight from the red can with the devil on the label, smeared on white bread, sometimes with a thin layer of yellow mustard, sometimes with nothing else at all. This was one of the cheapest sandwiches on the Woolworths menu, and for a lot of people it was the first time they ever tasted deviled ham. The can cost pennies. The labor cost was zero. You opened the can, you spread it, you served it. No cooking, no heating, no skill required. And yet, it tasted like something. That salty, finely ground pork paste with its smoky pepper bite was oddly addictive. Kids loved it because it came from a can with a cartoon devil. Adults loved it because it was filling and it cost almost nothing. Woolworth's lunch counters moved through cases of Underwood deviled ham every week. The spread had been around since the 1860s, making it one of the oldest branded food products in the country. But the lunch counter sandwich was the version that put it in front of millions of people who never would have bought the can at a grocery store. The waitress would set it down on a small plate next to a handful of potato chips and a pickle spear, and that was lunch. No sides menu, no upsell, just a sandwich that cost a dime and tasted like it cost more. When Woolworths disappeared, the deviled ham sandwich disappeared from public life along with it. You can still buy the can today at most grocery stores. The red devil is still on the label, and the recipe inside has barely changed. But nobody is spreading it on bread behind a lunch counter and sliding it across to you on a ceramic plate for pocket change. The deviled ham sandwich was never going to end up on a restaurant menu. It was too cheap, too simple, too plain for that. It needed a place like Woolworths to exist in public, and when that place was gone, the sandwich went back into kitchens and packed lunches where no one could see it. Number 18. Hot, open-faced turkey sandwich. A slice of white bread laid flat on a plate, covered with sliced turkey, then smothered in brown gravy. Mashed potatoes on the side, sometimes with a scoop of cranberry sauce. This was the Thanksgiving plate you could get any Tuesday in January, and Woolworths served it as a daily special in most locations. The turkey was roasted in-house in some stores and came from a commercial supplier in others, but the gravy was always made from drippings and flour, thick enough to hold its shape on the bread. You ate it with a knife and fork. Nobody picked this up. The gravy made sure of that. It was a full hot dinner for the price of a sandwich, and people who ate alone at the counter ordered it more than almost anything else. That open-faced turkey plate was comfort on a 10-inch ceramic dish. Number 17, Salisbury steak plate. A ground beef patty shaped into an oval, pan-fried and covered in thick mushroom gravy, served with mashed potatoes and usually a side of canned green beans. Woolworth's Salisbury steak was not a hamburger. The patty had breadcrumbs and egg mixed into the meat, which made it softer and stretched it further. 1 pound of ground beef could produce 3 or 4 patties this way, and the gravy covered up the fact that the meat was more filler than steak. The name came from a doctor in the 1880s who promoted ground beef patties as a health food. By the time Woolworths put it on the menu, nobody remembered the doctor. They just knew it was cheap, hot, and filling, and it came with enough gravy to make everything on the plate taste the same. Number 16, liver and onions. Sliced beef liver dusted in flour and pan-fried with a pile of yellow onions until both were soft and caramelized. Woolworths served it with mashed potatoes or boiled potatoes in a roll. This was old people food even in the 1950s. Younger customers walked past it. Older customers ordered it every week. The liver was thin cut, cooked fast in a hot skillet with butter, and the onions were piled on top until you could barely see the meat underneath. It was one of those dishes that divided the counter. Half the stools loved it, half the stools could smell it and wished they were sitting somewhere else. When Woolworths closed, liver and onions did not migrate to any other restaurant chain. It went home and stayed there, and even there, it is fading. The women behind the counter. Almost every Woolworths lunch counter in the country was run by women. They cooked, they served, they cleaned, and they did it for wages that barely covered bus fare. Most of them wore white uniforms and paper caps. Most of them knew the regulars by name and by order. They were not chefs, and they would have laughed if you called them that. They were working women who stood on their feet for 8 hours a day over a flat-top grill in a store that smelled like popcorn and floor wax. They kept the food moving, the coffee hot, and the counter clean, and they did it without complaint because complaining did not pay any better than cooking. When those women retired or moved on, nobody replaced them. The skill set did not transfer to fast food, and fast food did not want it. Number 15, tomato soup and crackers. A bowl of tomato soup, usually from a can, heated up and ladled into a heavy white bowl with a sleeve of saltine crackers on the side. Woolworths did not make the soup from scratch. They opened a can, added water, heated it on the stove, and served it. And it sold every single day. Tomato soup at the Woolworths counter was not about the soup. It was about the seat, the warmth, the 10 minutes of sitting down in the middle of a shopping trip with something hot in front of you. The crackers were always saltines, always in the cellophane sleeve, always 2 packs per bowl. You crumbled them in or you ate them on the side, and either way, you were done in under 10 minutes and back on your feet. For the price of that bowl, you bought yourself a rest. Number 14, Cheese Dreams. An open-faced sandwich with a slice of American cheese on white bread, sometimes topped with a strip of bacon or a slice of tomato. Then run under the broiler until the cheese bubbled and browned at the edges. The name appeared in home economics cookbooks as far back as 1916, and by the Depression years it had become a staple recipe for families stretching a grocery budget. Woolworths put it on the menu because it cost almost nothing to make and it sounded better than what it was, which was fancy toast with melted cheese. But Cheese Dreams had a following. People ordered them by name. The cheese had to be American, the bread had to be white, and the edges had to be browned, not just melted. A perfectly made cheese dream had a crispy border where the cheese met the bread and a soft, gooey center that pulled when you tore it. Some locations added a dash of Worcestershire sauce to the cheese before broiling. The variation depended entirely on whoever was running the kitchen that day. The name is what made it last. Cheese Dreams. It sounded whimsical in a way that nothing else on the menu did, and kids would order it just to say the name out loud. When the last Woolworths counter shut down, Cheese Dreams stopped being something you could order in public. The recipe still shows up in vintage cookbooks and on nostalgia websites, but the name has lost its home. Nobody puts cheese dreams on a menu today because nobody knows what they are, and explaining it just makes it sound like grilled cheese with extra steps. Number 13. Tuna melt. Tuna salad made from canned tuna, mayonnaise, and a little celery, spooned onto a slice of bread, topped with a slice of American cheese, and grilled or broiled until the cheese melted. The tuna melt was a lunch counter invention. It was not something people made at home first and then restaurants copied. It went the other way. Somebody behind a counter put cheese on a tuna sandwich and heated it up, and it worked. Woolworths served tuna melts in most of its locations, and the simplicity was the entire appeal. One can of tuna, one slice of cheese, one piece of bread, 5 minutes under heat. It was the fastest hot sandwich the kitchen could produce besides a grilled cheese, and it cost only a few cents more. The tuna melt outlasted Woolworths, but just barely. Number 12. Ham salad sandwich. Leftover ham ground through a meat grinder, mixed with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, and sometimes a little mustard, spread on soft bread. This was the original zero-waste sandwich. Whatever ham was left from the day before got ground up, mixed, chilled, and served as tomorrow's lunch special. Woolworths made it in bulk. The ham salad sat in a steel container behind the counter, scooped out per order, and nobody asked where the ham came from because nobody cared. It was cold, sweet, salty, and creamy all at once. The texture was somewhere between a spread and a chunky paste, and it was one of those sandwiches that you either grew up eating or you never understood. Number 11. Chili con carne. Ground beef, kidney beans, tomatoes, onions, and chili powder simmered in a big pot behind the counter and ladled into a bowl with crackers or spooned over a hot dog. Woolworth's chili had beans, and no Texan would have claimed it. But it was hot, it was filling, and it was the cheapest bowl of something substantial you could get at the counter. The chili sat in a pot on the back burner all day long, which meant the first bowl at 10 in the morning was different from the last bowl at 4 in the afternoon. The afternoon version was thicker, darker, and better because the flavors had hours to settle in. People who knew the counter knew to come late for the chili. That kind of kitchen knowledge died when the counter did. What the food industry replaced. The Woolworths lunch counter was replaced by something faster, cheaper, and worse. The food court took its square footage. The drive-thru took its speed. The frozen dinner took its convenience. But none of them took what the counter actually offered, which was a hot meal made by a person you could see, served on a real plate, eaten at a real counter in under 15 minutes for less than $1. The food industry looked at the Woolworths model and decided the labor was the problem. Get rid of the cooks, get rid of the waitresses, get rid of the plates. Wrap everything in paper, hand it through a window, and call it progress. The food got cheaper. The experience disappeared entirely. What Woolworths understood, and what the chains that replaced it never learned, is that people were not just paying for the food. They were paying for the seat. Number 10. Cherry phosphate. Cherry syrup mixed with phosphoric acid and carbonated water, served in a tall glass with a paper straw. This was the flagship drink of the American soda fountain, and every Woolworths that had a fountain served it. The phosphate gave the drink a sharp, almost tart bite that cut through the sweetness of the cherry syrup. It was not cherry soda. Cherry soda is sweet all the way through. A cherry phosphate had an edge to it, a tang that hit the back of your tongue and made you want another sip. The soda fountain at Woolworths was as much a part of the store as the candy counter, and the cherry phosphate was its signature pour. When Woolworths went, the soda fountain went, and the cherry phosphate went with it. You cannot order one anywhere today outside of a handful of retro diners. Number 9. Club sandwich. 3 slices of toast, turkey or chicken, bacon, lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise, stacked and held together with toothpicks and cut into triangles. The club sandwich was one of the more expensive items on the Woolworths menu because it used 3 slices of bread and real bacon. It was the special occasion lunch. You ordered a club sandwich when you had a little more money than usual, or when you were taking someone to the counter and wanted to look like you meant it. Woolworths built theirs tall. The toothpicks were necessary. The triangles fanned out on the plate, and you picked each one up carefully because the whole thing was structural engineering held together by willpower and mayonnaise. Number 8. Chicken a la king. Diced chicken in a thick cream sauce with peas, mushrooms, and pimentos served over toast points or in a patty shell. This was one of the fancier offerings at the Woolworths counter, and it came with a higher price to match. The cream sauce was made from a roux, and the chicken was usually leftover roast pulled apart by hand. The peas and mushrooms came from cans. The patty shell, when they used one, was a frozen puff pastry cup that puffed up in the oven and held the filling like a bowl you could eat. Chicken a la king was banquet food scaled down to lunch counter size. It made people feel like they were eating at a hotel dining room instead of a five and dime, and Woolworths priced it just high enough to maintain that feeling. Number 7. Meatloaf plate. A thick slice of meatloaf with brown gravy, mashed potatoes, and a vegetable, usually canned corn or green beans. Woolworths meatloaf was made from ground beef mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, onion, and ketchup. It was baked in a loaf pan in the morning and sliced to order throughout the day. The gravy was made from the drippings. The mashed potatoes were real in the better locations and from flakes in the rest. Nobody complained either way because the gravy covered everything. A meatloaf plate was the closest thing the Woolworths counter had to a home-cooked dinner, and people who lived alone ordered it more than anyone else. It was someone else's meatloaf, and sometimes that is exactly what a person needs. The plate, the gravy, the vegetable on the side. All of it felt like sitting down at someone's kitchen table instead of a store counter. Number 6. Coconut cream pie. A flaky crust filled with thick coconut custard, topped with whipped cream and a layer of toasted coconut flakes. Woolworths kept whole pies on display under glass domes at the counter, and the waitress would slice your piece right in front of you. The coconut cream was the best seller in most stores, ahead of the lemon meringue and the chocolate cream. The custard was dense and sweet, and the toasted coconut on top gave it a crunch that the other cream pies did not have. People came in just for the pie. They sat down, ordered a slice and a cup of coffee, and left. The pie case was the last thing the stores gave up when the lunch counters started closing, and in some locations it was the only part still operating before the final doors shut. Number 5. Banana split. A whole banana split lengthwise, laid in a long glass dish, topped with 3 scoops of ice cream, chocolate syrup, strawberry sauce, pineapple topping, whipped cream, chopped nuts, and a cherry on each scoop. The banana split was the showpiece of the Woolworths soda fountain. It was not a snack. It was an event. Ordering one was a commitment, and finishing one was an achievement. The glass dish was specific to the banana split, long and narrow, and every Woolworths had a stack of them behind the fountain. The banana had to be ripe but firm. Too ripe, and it turned to mush under the ice cream. Making a banana split at the counter was a performance. The fountain worker built it in front of you, and watching it come together was half the reason you ordered it. That entire ritual is gone from daily life. Number 4. Hot dog on a steamed bun. A beef frankfurter boiled or grilled and dropped into a soft bun that had been sitting in a steam box all morning. Mustard, relish, onions. The hot dog at Woolworths was not special by any standard. It was a plain hot dog on a steamed bun. But the steamed bun is what people remember. That bun was so soft it practically dissolved when you bit into it. It held just enough to keep the hot dog in your hand and fell apart at exactly the right moment. The steam box was a steel cabinet behind the counter that kept the buns warm and moist all day, and nobody has replicated that texture since. Every hot dog you buy today comes on a bun that fights back. The Woolworths bun gave in without a struggle, and that softness is what made it unforgettable. Number 3. Grilled cheese sandwich. American cheese between 2 slices of white bread, buttered on the outside and pressed flat on the flat-top grill until both sides were golden brown, and the cheese was melted through. The Woolworth's grilled cheese was not made with cheddar or Gruyere or sourdough. It was processed American cheese on the cheapest white bread available, grilled on the same flat top that cooked the burgers and the bacon. And it was perfect. The butter browned evenly because the grill was hot and flat and nobody flipped it too early. The cheese melted into a single sheet that stretched when you pulled the halves apart. You got it with a pickle and a handful of chips. That sandwich was the backbone of the Woolworth's counter, ordered more than anything else on the menu, and if you are older than 60, you can probably still taste it right now. Number 2. Lemon meringue pie. A butter crust filled with tart lemon custard, topped with a tall, golden-peaked meringue that wobbled when the waitress set the plate down. If the coconut cream pie was the best seller, the lemon meringue was the one people talked about. The meringue was the thing. It stood tall in a good Woolworth's, browned on the tips, soft and marshmallow-like inside. The lemon filling underneath was bright and sharp, the kind of sour that made you pucker and then reach for another forkful. Woolworth's baked these in-house, and you could see the pies sitting in the glass case from across the store. That tall meringue was advertising. It pulled people to the counter the same way the smell of grilled onions did, except it worked through the eyes instead of the nose. Number 1. The Blue Plate Special. It was not one dish. It changed every day. Monday might be pot roast with carrots and mashed potatoes. Tuesday might be fried chicken with coleslaw and a roll. Wednesday might be baked ham with green beans and sweet potatoes. The Blue Plate Special was whatever the kitchen made that morning in large quantity, served on a divided plate for one fixed price. You did not choose it. You accepted it. And that acceptance was the whole contract. The Blue Plate Special was the last true daily meal in American public life. It meant someone in that kitchen decided what you were going to eat today, cooked it in quantity, and priced it so that anyone could afford it. There was no customization, no substitution, no on the side. You got what everyone else got. And sitting at that counter eating the same meal as the stranger next to you created something that no menu with 47 options has ever created since. When the Woolworth's counter closed, the Blue Plate Special did not move to another restaurant. It could not. It needed a place where the food was cheap, the portions were honest, and nobody pretended it was anything more than a good hot lunch. That place is gone. Number 18. Horseshoe Sandwich. Springfield, Illinois gave the world this one, and Springfield is about the only place that still makes it. An open-faced sandwich on thick-cut Texas toast, piled with a hamburger patty or sliced ham, covered with a blanket of French fries, and then doused in a warm cheese sauce that soaked into everything underneath. It was invented at the Leland Hotel in 1928. The name came from the shape of the original ham cut, which looked like a horseshoe sitting on the plate. A half portion was called a pony shoe. Lunch counters across central Illinois served them for decades, but the horseshoe was too regional, too messy, and too strange-sounding for any chain to adopt. Number 17. Loose meat sandwich. In 1926, a butcher named Fred Angel opened a small lunch counter in Muscatine, Iowa, and started serving seasoned ground beef cooked loose and crumbly, spooned onto a soft hamburger bun. He called his shop Made Right, and the sandwich spread across the Midwest like a quiet grass fire. Loose meat was cheaper than forming patties, and the texture was something else entirely. The beef crumbled when you bit into it, and half of it fell onto the wax paper below. You ate the fallout with a spoon. By the 1970s, Made Right had more than 100 locations across Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota. Most are gone now. The loose meat sandwich lives on in a few stubborn franchises and in the kitchens of people old enough to remember what it tasted like. Peanut butter bars satisfied the after-lunch sweet tooth while delivering protein that helped students focus through afternoon classes. A base layer of oats, flour, brown sugar, and butter was pressed into sheet pans and baked until golden. Creamy peanut butter was mixed with powdered sugar and softened butter to create a thick filling spread across the warm crust. The final layer of chocolate chips melted over warm peanut butter created a glossy, dark topping that firmed as it cooled. Cut into small squares, These bars were rich enough that modest portions satisfied completely. The combination of textures made eating them an experience requiring attention and appreciation. Schools could prepare massive batches that held well throughout lunch service without refrigeration. The ingredients were affordable and the recipe forgiving, allowing even inexperienced bakers to produce consistent results. Peanut butter bars became trading currency in cafeterias, with students offering milk cartons and fruit cups for extra squares. Number 17. Meatloaf sandwich. A thick slab of cold meatloaf from the day before, sliced straight from the icebox and laid between two pieces of white bread with mustard and a leaf of iceberg lettuce. Lunch counters made meatloaf in sheet pans every morning, and whatever did not sell as a hot plate at dinner became sandwiches the next day. The bread went soft against the cold meat, and the mustard cut through the dense, beefy flavor just enough to keep the whole thing from feeling heavy. Some places served it warm, reheated on the flat grill with a slice of onion and a smear of ketchup. Others added a slice of American cheese and pressed it like a patty melt. The meatloaf sandwich was not glamorous, and nobody ever ordered it to impress anyone, but it was solid and filling, and you could eat it with one hand while reading the newspaper with the other. When lunch counters gave way to fast food chains, the meatloaf sandwich did not survive the transition. It was too plain, too slow, and too connected to the idea of yesterday's dinner to fit on a modern menu. Number 20. Slinger. If you did not grow up in St. Louis, you have probably never heard of this one. A pile of hash browns topped with 2 eggs, a hamburger patty, a ladle of chili, and a fistful of shredded cheese. Some counters threw diced raw onions on top for good measure. The whole thing arrived on an oval plate and weighed close to 2 pounds. It was the late-night meal of factory workers, cab drivers, and anyone leaving a bar at 2 in the morning. The diners along South Grand Avenue served them around the clock. A slinger required a cook who didn't mind the mess and a customer who didn't count calories. Fast food never even attempted it. What fast food actually replaced was not a type of food. It was a way of being fed. At a lunch counter, someone stood 3 feet away from you and cooked your meal while you watched. You saw the butter go into the pan. You heard the onions hit the griddle. The cook adjusted your order without you having to ask. Extra pickle? She already knew. When the chains moved the kitchen behind a wall and the customer behind a steering wheel, they didn't just change the menu. They removed the relationship. The meals on this list didn't disappear because people stopped wanting them. They disappeared because the places that served them required a human being behind the counter who remembered your name. That person cost more than a microwave. Creamed peas on toast represented the practical philosophy that defined Depression-era cooking carried forward into 70s cafeterias. Frozen peas were simmered in a white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk until the sauce thickened enough to coat a spoon. This creamy mixture was spooned generously over slices of white toast that had been lightly buttered and kept warm in steam tables. The toast absorbed the sauce gradually, creating layers of texture from crispy edges to soft, sauce-soaked centers. Some cafeterias added hard-boiled egg slices on top for additional protein and visual appeal. The dish looked simple, but delivered genuine comfort, especially on cold winter days when students needed warming from the inside. Teachers who remembered eating similar meals during their own childhoods often praised the cafeteria for keeping this tradition alive. Creamed peas on toast taught students that deliciousness didn't require complexity, and that vegetables could taste genuinely good when prepared with care. Number 20. Sardine sandwich. A tin of sardines mashed flat on dark rye bread with a squeeze of lemon, a few rings of raw onion, and a smear of mustard. This was a working sandwich, the kind ordered by men who came in from the loading dock with 15 minutes and no patience for anything complicated. Lunch counters in port cities and industrial neighborhoods kept sardine tins stacked behind the counter because they were cheap, they lasted forever, and the sandwich took 30 seconds to assemble. The fish was salty and soft, and the rye bread kept it from falling apart. Some places served it open-faced with a slice of tomato. Others pressed the bread down tight and cut it on the diagonal. It never pretended to be elegant, and nobody ordered it on a date. The sardine sandwich started disappearing from American lunch counter menus in the 1960s, pushed aside by tuna salad, which was milder and did not divide the room with its smell. The tin is still on the grocery shelf, but the sandwich itself belongs to a counter and a crowd that no longer exist. Number 25. Liver and onions. No meal divided a lunch counter faster than this one. You either loved it or you moved 3 stools down to get away from the smell. Thin slices of calf's liver dusted in seasoned flour and fried in butter alongside a pile of yellow onions that went soft and sweet in the pan. A side of mashed potatoes soaked up the juice. By the 1960s, liver and onions was already falling off menus as younger customers flat out refused to touch organ meat. Today, it survives in a handful of old-school diners scattered across the country, but no fast food chain ever considered putting it on the board. The audience was aging out, and the smell was never going to sell at a drive-thru. American chop suey was the cafeteria's answer to Italian-Chinese fusion decades before fusion cuisine became trendy. Elbow macaroni was boiled until tender, then mixed with seasoned ground beef browned with onions and green peppers in massive tilting skillets. Tomato sauce and a blend of spices, including oregano and garlic powder, brought everything together into a hearty one-pot meal that could serve hundreds of students. The dish had nothing to do with actual Chinese cooking, but its name suggested exotic origins that made it seem more interesting than simple beef and pasta. Schools across New England particularly embraced this recipe, serving it weekly throughout fall and winter months. The combination of protein, starch, and vegetables in one serving made it nutritionally complete and easy to portion. Cafeteria ladies could prepare enormous batches in advance and keep them warm in steam tables for hours without quality loss. American chop suey was cafeteria efficiency at its finest. Number 21. Ribbon sandwich. This was the lunch counter sandwich that tried to look elegant. 3 or 4 thin slices of crustless white and wheat bread stacked in alternating layers with different fillings between each one, pressed flat, chilled, and sliced crosswise so the layers showed like ribbons. The fillings were simple: cream cheese tinted pink with pimento on one layer, egg salad on the next, a thin spread of deviled ham on the third. The whole thing was held together by the cream cheese acting as glue. Lunch counters, tea rooms, and hotel coffee shops served ribbon sandwiches on oval plates with a sprig of parsley, and for decades they were the standard order for women's luncheons and bridal showers. Making them took time and steady hands, which is exactly why they vanished. When labor got expensive and lunch got fast, nobody had the patience to trim crusts and stack layers for a sandwich that sold for the same price as a ham on rye. A lunch counter was not a restaurant. It was a strip of formica bolted to the wall of a store that sold something else entirely. You ate with strangers on both sides of you, close enough to bump elbows, and the cook worked in full view so you could watch your food being made. There was no tipping culture to speak of, no waitstaff, no atmosphere, just speed, low prices, and a short menu that never changed. The sandwiches on that menu were not invented by chefs. They were invented by time pressure and tight margins. A counter cook needed to make something good with 5 ingredients in 90 seconds. That constraint shaped every sandwich on this list, and when the constraint disappeared, so did the food. The chain restaurants moved in, the lunch counters locked their doors, and an entire category of American cooking simply stopped being made. Number 27. Welsh rarebit. Melted cheddar cheese mixed with a splash of beer, a pinch of dry mustard, and Worcestershire sauce, poured hot over thick toast. It came from England, but ended up on almost every drugstore lunch counter in America by the 1940s. The name confused people then, and it confuses people now. It has nothing to do with rabbits. Rarebit was rich enough to count as a full meal and fast enough to make during a 15-minute lunch break. You could sit at the Walgreens soda fountain in Chicago and eat one while your prescription was being filled. When cheese became something you unwrapped from plastic, rarebit quietly lost its reason to exist. Salmon croquettes appeared on cafeteria menus when budget constraints required creative protein solutions during the middle of the month. Canned salmon was mashed with crushed saltine crackers, beaten eggs, and minced onion until the mixture held together enough to form into oval patties. These patties were dredged in cracker crumbs and fried until golden brown and crispy outside while staying moist and flaky within. The salmon flavor was mild and slightly sweet, nothing like fresh fish, but comforting in its own institutional way. Cafeteria ladies served them with tartar sauce and often paired them with creamed peas or macaroni salad. Children either loved or hated salmon croquettes, with little middle ground, but those who loved them remembered the crispy exterior giving way to tender fish inside. The recipe stretched expensive protein into affordable portions while providing genuine nutrition. Salmon croquettes represented practical cooking wisdom that prioritized feeding children well. Number 18. Limburger cheese sandwich. If you have never smelled Limburger, you either missed out or dodged a bullet, depending on who raised you. This was a soft, pungent cheese with a smell strong enough to announce itself from across the room, and lunch counters in German-American neighborhoods served it on dark rye with a thick slice of raw onion and brown mustard. The combination was not subtle and was never meant to be. Factory workers and railroad men ordered it because it was filling and cheap, and the smell kept other people from asking for a bite. By the 1970s, Limburger was harder to find, and the neighborhoods that favored it had changed. The sandwich hung on in a few taverns in Wisconsin and parts of the upper Midwest, but as a lunch counter item, it was finished. The people who loved it still talk about it. Everyone else just remembers the smell. Number 19. Pork tenderloin sandwich. In Indiana, this is not a sandwich. It is an institution. A boneless piece of pork loin pounded flat with a meat mallet until it spread out far wider than the bun, dredged in seasoned flour and deep-fried until the coating crackled when you bit through it. The finished cutlet hung over the edges of a plain white hamburger bun by 2 or 3 inches on every side. Pickles, onion, and mustard. That was the standard. No lettuce, no tomato, no special sauce. The town of Huntington has served them since the 1930s, and Nick's Kitchen on the Courthouse Square has been frying them on the same equipment for 3 generations. The Indiana pork tenderloin sandwich was the meal that proved a lunch counter could have a regional identity as strong as any restaurant. Every small town had a version, and regulars argued for decades about whose was best: Edinburgh or Mooresville, Huntington or Decatur. These were real debates among people who ate lunch at a counter 5 days a week and took the question seriously. When the interstates pulled traffic away from small-town main streets in the 1960s and 1970s, the lunch counters that served these went dark one by one. The sandwich survived in a few stubborn spots, but the culture of sitting at a counter in a town you actually lived in, eating the same tenderloin your father ordered before you, that part is mostly gone. The breading recipe was never written down in most of these places. It lived in the hands of whoever was working the fryer that morning, and when she retired or the counter closed, the recipe went with her. A handful of Indiana towns still hold pork tenderloin festivals every summer. The lines stretch around the block. The people standing in them remember exactly what they are there for. Turkey tetrazzini transformed Thanksgiving leftovers into a creamy casserole that students actually requested by name. Cubed turkey was folded into cooked spaghetti, along with sliced mushrooms and a rich sauce made from butter, flour, milk, and chicken broth. The mixture was poured into deep hotel pans, topped with Parmesan and breadcrumbs, then baked until golden and bubbling around the edges. The sauce became silky during baking, clinging to every strand of pasta and piece of turkey. What made this dish special was how it elevated ordinary ingredients into something almost elegant for a school cafeteria. The mushrooms added earthiness, the Parmesan contributed sharpness, and the breadcrumb topping provided textural contrast. November and December menus featured turkey tetrazzini regularly as schools worked through commodity turkey supplies. Children who typically avoided casseroles made exceptions for this one, scraping their trays clean. Turkey tetrazzini proved institutional cooking could achieve genuine deliciousness. Number 19. Braunschweiger sandwich. Braunschweiger was a smoked liverwurst, softer and richer than the regular kind, and it spread like butter across a slice of pumpernickel. Lunch counters in the Midwest served it thick, with a slice of raw onion and a squirt of yellow mustard, and it was one of those sandwiches you either grew up eating or could not understand at all. The name came from Braunschweig, a city in Germany, and the sausage itself was part of the massive wave of German food traditions that shaped American eating from the 1850s forward. Along with frankfurters, sauerkraut, and rye bread, Braunschweiger became a grocery store staple. By mid-century, Oscar Mayer, Usinger's in Milwaukee, and dozens of small regional packers all made their own version, each one slightly different in smoke level and spice. The lunch counter version was simple. The cook sliced it from a chub, fanned it across the bread, and slid the plate down the counter without ceremony. What made it memorable was the flavor. Rich, smoky, and faintly mineral with a paste-like texture that stuck to the roof of your mouth. Some people added lettuce and tomato, which did absolutely nothing to soften the intensity. Others paired it with sharp cheddar and a few cornichons on the side. There was a time when this sandwich showed up at every five and dime from Davenport to Duluth. The counter cook kept a fresh chub wrapped in wax paper next to the mustard jar, and it went through a full chub every day or two. Kids ate it because their fathers ate it. Fathers ate it because their fathers brought the taste from the old country. When lunch counters closed and supermarket delis started pushing turkey and roast beef, Braunschweiger retreated to the back of the cold case. You can still find it in parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota, but the sandwich as a lunch counter standard is gone. One generation grew up on it, and the next one grew up pretending it never existed. Number 28. Cream-chipped beef on toast. Soldiers called it something unprintable during both World Wars, but the lunch counter version was a different animal entirely. Paper-thin slices of dried beef stirred into a thick white sauce made from butter, flour, and whole milk, poured over 2 slices of toast. Some counters used biscuits instead. It was salty, rich, and filling. Factory towns in Pennsylvania and Ohio kept this on the board well into the 1970s because the men coming off the night shift needed something heavy and fast. When the last Woolworth's lunch counters closed in 1997, creamed chipped beef lost its final home. Nobody mourned it publicly, but if you grew up eating it, you remember exactly how it tasted. Fruit cocktail cake emerged as the dessert that proved cafeteria baking could compete with homemade versions. Canned fruit cocktail with its syrup was folded directly into yellow cake batter, creating pockets of sweet fruit throughout each slice. The cake baked up moist and tender, with the fruit settling slightly toward the bottom where it became jammy and caramelized against the pan. Some recipes called for a brown sugar and coconut topping that turned crunchy during baking, adding textural contrast to the soft crumb. Students looked forward to dessert days when fruit cocktail cake appeared, trading other items for extra squares of this surprisingly sophisticated sweet. The recipe used shelf-stable ingredients that schools could purchase in bulk and store indefinitely. Cafeteria bakers took pride in their fruit cocktail cakes, sometimes adding personal touches like nutmeg or vanilla. This cake represented the hidden talent within school kitchens and the genuine care that cafeteria workers brought to feeding children. Before I go any further, this one is for the folks who want more old recipes like these collected in one place. I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide, a full cookbook with hundreds of recipes from the same era as the sandwiches on this list. You can find it on my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not bring it up again. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Number 23. Chicken a la King Sandwich. Diced chicken in a thick cream sauce with mushrooms and pimentos, spooned hot over a slice of toast and eaten with a knife and fork. This was the lunch counter version of something fancy, and every waitress in a white apron knew how to plate it so the sauce pooled just right without running off the bread. The chicken was usually leftover roast, pulled apart and stirred into a roux made with butter, flour, and whole milk. The mushrooms were canned, the pimentos came from a jar, and none of that mattered because the sauce was rich enough to make you forget where the ingredients started. Lunch counters served it as an open-faced special with a side of canned peas or a small salad, and the ticket rarely topped $1. By the late 1970s, the dish had moved to frozen dinner trays and hotel banquet halls, and the lunch counter version disappeared with the counters themselves. Number 22. date nut bread with cream cheese. Every lunch counter had a loaf of dark, dense date nut bread sitting under a glass dome near the register. The cook sliced it thin, spread both sides with cream cheese, and served it on a small plate with no garnish. It was sweet, earthy, and filling. The bread itself was studded with chopped walnuts and sticky pieces of date, and it held together like a brick. Some counters bought the canned version from Dromedary, which came in a tall, cylindrical tin you opened from both ends and pushed the loaf out like a log. Nobody under 60 remembers this sandwich today. The canned bread disappeared from most grocery shelves by the 1980s, and the lunch counter version vanished even earlier. Number 22. Denver sandwich. A Denver omelet folded between two slices of white bread, as common at lunch counters west of the Mississippi as the hamburger itself. Diced ham, green bell pepper, and onion cooked into beaten eggs, pressed flat on the griddle, and served with a pickle spear on the side. In Colorado and Wyoming, every counter had one. Some added cheese, some served it on toast instead of plain bread. You could eat it with one hand while reading the morning paper, and that simplicity was the whole point. Fast food chains tried and failed to turn the breakfast sandwich into something this satisfying. They settled for the Egg McMuffin instead. Cheese zombies were the mysterious bread pockets that appeared under different names in cafeterias across America throughout the decade. Soft bread dough was wrapped around American cheese slices, sealed at the edges, and baked until golden brown and puffy. When students bit through the tender crust, melted cheese stretched in long strings that required careful navigation to avoid dripping onto shirts. The name varied by region, with some schools calling them cheese pockets or cheesy bread, but the concept remained consistent. These handheld treats required no utensils and could be eaten while walking to recess, making them popular with children who wanted to maximize playground time. Cafeteria workers could prepare hundreds in advance, freezing unbaked zombies for later use when schedules demanded quick solutions. The combination of soft bread and gooey cheese created a textural experience that students remembered decades later. Cheese zombies proved that simple combinations executed well could achieve legendary status in lunch. Number 16. Egg salad on toast. Hard-boiled eggs chopped with a fork, mixed with mayonnaise and a pinch of celery salt, spread on toasted white bread with a leaf of iceberg lettuce. This was the default sandwich for anyone who wanted something plain and dependable. The eggs were boiled in the morning, and the salad was mixed by 10. It sat in a bowl behind the glass and went onto bread all day long without refrigeration, which is probably why health codes eventually helped retire it. The egg salad at a lunch counter was never cold. It was room temperature at best, slightly warm at worst, and somehow nobody seemed to mind. You could order it at Newberry's, McCrory's, Kresge, or any drugstore with a soda fountain, and it tasted exactly the same everywhere. The chalkboard behind the counter listed prices and names, but it never explained where these sandwiches came from. Most of them were immigrant food, recipes carried across the Atlantic and simplified for speed. German butchers brought the liverwurst and the Braunschweiger. Eastern European delis contributed the tongue and the rye bread. Southern cooks brought the pimento cheese. The lunch counter took all of it, stripped out the ceremony, and served it fast and cheap to anyone who sat down. For decades, this was how American food actually worked. Not restaurants, not cookbooks, not famous chefs. A flat-top grill, a loaf of bread, and whatever the neighborhood already knew how to eat. The lunch counter was the most democratic kitchen in the country, and nobody thought to write down what it served before it disappeared. Number 24. Salmon croquettes. A can of pink salmon drained and mixed with crushed saltine crackers, an egg, and diced onion, shaped into small patties and fried golden brown. Tartar sauce on the side. Lemon wedge if the counter was fancy. This was the fish meal of the inland lunch counter, hundreds of miles from any ocean, and it showed up on Fridays in Catholic towns across the Midwest without fail. The canned salmon made it affordable. The crackers made it stretch. When frozen fish sticks took over school cafeterias and fast food menus in the 1970s, the humble croquette lost its spot on the board. Nobody protested. It just slid off the chalkboard one Friday and never came back. Cheeseburger pie turned the beloved American hamburger into a casserole that could feed entire classrooms from a single pan. Ground beef was browned with onions and seasoned with salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce, then spread across the bottom of baking dishes. A simple batter made from eggs, milk, flour, and baking powder was poured over the meat layer, creating a soft bread-like topping as it baked. Sliced American cheese was layered on top during the final minutes of baking, melting into a golden blanket that tied everything together. The result was somewhere between a burger, a biscuit, and a pot pie, satisfying multiple cravings simultaneously. Cafeteria ladies loved this recipe because it required no individual assembly and could be sliced into perfect portions. Students loved it because it delivered all the flavors they craved from cheeseburgers without the mess. Cheeseburger pie represented the creative problem-solving that defined school cafeteria cooking. Number 16. Corned beef hash and eggs, straight from the can, scooped onto a hot griddle, pressed flat with a spatula, and left alone until the bottom turned dark brown and crispy. One flip. 2 fried eggs cracked on top, toast on the side. The canned hash had a specific texture that homemade versions never quite matched, dense and salty with small cubes of potato held together by rendered beef fat. It was a meal that tasted better at a counter than it ever did at home, because the commercial griddle ran hotter and the cook knew exactly when to flip it by the sound alone. Canned corned beef hash is still on grocery shelves today. The counters that knew how to cook it right are not. Number 15. Beef Manhattan. Open-faced roast beef on white bread, a scoop of mashed potatoes beside it, and the whole plate swimming in brown gravy. In the Midwest, this was the Thursday special at half the lunch counters in town. The beef was roasted in-house early that morning, sliced thin, and kept warm in its own juices all through the lunch rush. The gravy came from the drippings. Nothing about it was complicated, but every part of it required a cook who roasted real beef and made real gravy from scratch. A beef Manhattan took hours of preparation before it took minutes to plate. The chains needed meals that took only minutes from start to finish. So they sold you a roast beef sandwich with no gravy, no potatoes, and no plate. Rectangular school pizza became the iconic lunch that defined cafeteria culture throughout the decade. Unlike round pizzeria pies, these pizzas were baked on massive sheet pans and cut into perfect squares that fit neatly onto compartmentalized lunch trays. The crust was thick, doughy, and slightly chewy, with a golden bottom from being baked directly on greased aluminum. Cafeteria workers spread tomato sauce from industrial cans across the dough, then covered it with mozzarella and commodity cheese that turned bubbly and brown in commercial ovens. The cheese had a particular stretchiness that regular pizza couldn't match, pulling into long strings when students bit into their squares. Friday Pizza Day was sacred, and children who forgot their lunch money suffered genuine disappointment. The recipe was simple, but execution required timing and institutional knowledge passed between cafeteria veterans. Rectangular school pizza created its own category of comfort that generations still remember fondly. Number 29. Cottage cheese and fruit plate. Every lunch counter had a version of this, and none of them looked the same. Some gave you half a canned peach sitting on a leaf of iceberg lettuce with a scoop of cottage cheese beside it. Others arranged pineapple rings, pear halves, and a cherry on top like a small edible centerpiece. It was the meal women ordered when they wanted something light, and it came on a cold plate in the middle of summer when nothing hot sounded good. Try ordering a cottage cheese plate at any fast food counter today. You will get a blank stare. Before I go further, for the folks who want more recipes like these gathered in one place, I put together the Vintage Recipe Guide. You can find it at my website, vintagelifestyleusa.com. I will not push it again in this video. If you want it, it is there. Now, back to the list. Swedish meatballs arrived in cafeterias during a decade when Scandinavian cuisine briefly captured American imagination. These smaller, rounder meatballs were made from a mixture of ground beef and pork, combined with breadcrumbs soaked in milk, creating an exceptionally tender texture. The secret was the creamy gravy made from pan drippings, beef broth, and sour cream that coated each meatball in pale brown sauce. Cafeteria versions often substituted evaporated milk for sour cream to reduce costs, but the result remained surprisingly delicious. Students received portions of meatballs swimming in gravy alongside egg noodles or mashed potatoes that soaked up every drop of sauce. The dish felt sophisticated compared to typical cafeteria fare, introducing children to flavors beyond standard American cooking. Teachers often requested extra portions, recognizing quality when they tasted it. Swedish meatballs showed that school kitchens could execute international recipes when given proper ingredients. Number 23. Chicken a la king on toast points. Diced chicken in a thick cream sauce with green peas, diced pimento, and sometimes a splash of sherry, served over triangles of toast cut corner to corner. This was the lunch counter's version of elegance. The Schrafft's chain in New York served it on real china. The Woolworths in Topeka served it on a divided plastic plate. The sauce was always pale yellow and impossibly rich. The dish had been a hotel dining room staple since the 1890s, but the lunch counter democratized it. For 75 cents, you got what the Waldorf charged $3 for. By the 1980s, it was gone from almost every menu, replaced by nothing in particular. It just stopped appearing. Cafeteria goulash bore little resemblance to authentic Hungarian cooking, but became beloved comfort food in school lunchrooms nonetheless. Elbow macaroni was combined with ground beef, diced tomatoes, tomato sauce, and a blend of seasonings that varied by region and cook. The mixture simmered together until the pasta absorbed the tomato flavors and the meat distributed evenly throughout the pot. What distinguished goulash from American chop suey was often regional tradition rather than recipe differences, with Midwestern schools particularly attached to the goulash name. Served in deep compartments on lunch trays, the dish provided complete nutrition in a single portion that required only a spoon. Cafeteria ladies could prepare massive batches that held well in steam tables for extended service periods. Students who initially resisted the unfamiliar appearance often became devoted fans after the first bite revealed familiar flavors. Cafeteria goulash taught children that foods with strange names could still taste like home. Number 21. Hot brown sandwich. The Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky invented this in 1926, and within a decade it had migrated to lunch counters across the Upper South. Open-faced turkey on white toast, covered in a rich Mornay sauce made from Parmesan and cream, topped with crispy bacon and a broiled tomato slice. The whole thing went under a salamander broiler until the cheese bubbled brown on top. It was messy, heavy, and required a knife and fork. That last part is what killed it. Fast food needed meals you could eat in a car. The hot brown needed a real plate and someone willing to wash it afterward. A few Louisville restaurants still serve it. Everywhere else, it is a ghost. Hamburger gravy over mashed potatoes was the meal that proved cafeteria ladies understood comfort food better than any restaurant chef. Ground beef was browned in massive tilting skillets. Then flour was sprinkled over the meat and stirred until it absorbed the fat and juices. Milk or beef broth was added gradually while stirring constantly until a thick, creamy gravy formed around every crumble of meat. This savory mixture was ladled generously over mounds of mashed potatoes made from flakes reconstituted with butter and milk. The combination created a meal that satisfied on the deepest level, warming children from the inside out on cold school days. Students who cleaned their trays often returned for seconds when available, and the smell of browning beef drew them toward the lunch line before the bell rang. The recipe required minimal ingredients but maximum attention to technique, as lumpy gravy was considered unacceptable by proud cafeteria veterans. Hamburger gravy represented honest institutional cooking at its finest. Number 30. Fried bologna sandwich. A thick slice of bologna, scored with a knife so it wouldn't curl, pressed flat on a hot griddle until the edges turned brown and crispy. 2 slices of soft white bread, a slap of yellow mustard, maybe a slice of American cheese if you asked for it. The whole thing cost a dime in 1961. It was the cheapest hot meal on the board, and truck drivers, factory workers, and teenagers on their lunch break all lined up for it. The trick was the scoring. Without those cuts, the bologna would buckle and curl in the center, leaving you with a dome of warm meat and cold bread around the edges. Every lunch counter cook knew this. No fast food chain ever figured out how to replicate that sear. They never tried. 25 foods from a counter that never had a reservation book, never had a hostess, and never turned anyone away. None of them were complicated. None of them were expensive. All of them are gone from public life. If you remember sitting at that counter, share this video with someone who sat next to you. And if you are still here and still cooking, hit subscribe and stick around. I have more of these coming. I am James, and I will see you in the next one.